It's coffee. Can we play the... Sorry, Seán, we keep on making requests for things for you to put into these podcasts. You're going to spend half your week just...
finding funny clips.
You're just like sleeping and searching at the same time for the Jeffree Star. Yay! The start of last week's podcast was so fun though. So for anyone that hasn't listened yet, go and listen or watch on YouTube. But we had Kate Nichol on, and we've now crowned our new best podcast ever. We should really stop doing this.
No, because it's such a rage to everybody else who's been on. But
come on.
Recency bias. Like,
that is what it is.
Yeah, Matt does this with gigs. It's like we come away from like the most mediocre gig ever, and he just gets in the car and he goes, I think that's top 5.
Recency bias.
Yeah.
I've
love
never heard that
it.
before, but that's totally a thing.
Love it.
That is the new...
It's like it's used a lot in football talk. Like they say, like, when people start like saying that a team is like really, really good, like, oh, that could be one of the best of all time. It's like, no, it's recency bias. It's just because you've seen them close and you don't remember how things used to be.
That is so true.
I suppose it's the new song that you hear. I do this thing with songs where I like hyper focus. Yeah, and I'm like,
ADHD,
I really love this so much that I will play it constantly, and it will be my favourite song ever. And rather than favourite song, which is quite the reach, it will be like top 5, like that same sort of approach. But then once sort of a couple of weeks pass, it's gone. We will never listen. Like, it was Lucy LaDuca. Let loose, baby, let loose. And if Becky just shows a tiny little bit of like an eye roll, just like, ugh. It's on.
It has to be like a fair way down the line though before it gets to the eye roll stage.
Well, I think with Lucy LaDuca, that's her name, isn't it? Lucy LaDuca. That's quite a hard one. So she's a drag queen from New York, and she was on RuPaul's Drag Race. This is now RuPaul's Drag Race recap show.
I don't think people are like exactly hating that.
I don't think so. I think what we're recapping there was stuff that happened ages ago. We don't care about it anymore.
It's like, have you just heard about Seán Needles?
Yes. And Sharon Needles, we were talking one night where we were talking about how drag names sort of have second meanings and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And only that we were then talking in that sense, I said Sharon Needles is sharing needles.
I was like...
And that's the...
I
Years
had one
in.
of these too.
Years in.
Who was yours?
Mine was Courtney Act.
Oh, really?
Courtney Act.
It took me so long. It was only like... Or was a mention of her, or she like done like a wee cameo in like an episode like not too long ago, and Nicole said it in an Australian accent, and I went, what?
I just got that.
And she's like, how have you never clicked?
This is not recency bias. Courtney Act is actually top 5.
I totally agree, but I also think that it was watching like a really beautiful documentary that they did, and they were talking about being gender fluid and things like that really kind of unlocked something for you as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I just find the way that they speak about gender and sexuality and sexual health just like so important, and it's kind of like it's the perfect mix of like the light and the colour and the joy and the fun with like a really important message. But the way that she puts it across, I think it was maybe Channel 4 give her the platform. They did a whole wee series. But that's really
and being on Big Brother and all, like the amount of like exposure like that gave, and like and it was a lot of people's introduction to those types of conversation,
and being so human and reasonable, like what we were talking about with Kate last week about like, you know, talking to the human, not talking to their opinions type thing. But with Anne Widdecombe, you know, with all of the hateful shit that woman comes out with, you know, but yet it's kind of impossible to not have like Courtney Act in front of you and not be able to just find them so charming and so lovely and disarming in that way as well. And disarming literally means that, where you come into a conversation armed and primed, ready to fight, you know, but being that lovely, warm, funny person just sort of makes all of that armory fall away.
It's,
you know?
what over now thousands of years Christians have really honed in on. Christians and other religions out there,
are also problematic.
I love that line.
But that so many of the world religions have sort of honed in on, where they will. So their message is often vile. It's often anti-equality. They will actively campaign for people to have people like LGBT people and all sorts of other groups to have less rights. But they're very good at whenever you sort of, you know, you're at a protest and they're there with their, you know, you're going to hell banners or whatever, and you give them some stick. They're very good with them. But we
love you.
But we love you. You know,
we love you.
And that is disarming. It's actually it's infuriating.
I'm sorry,
but it's you know it's a no. You misunderstand. You know, we're just spreading the message of the Lord Jesus Christ or whoever else. And our intention is just to, you know, it's for love. It's for you. It's to protect you in the afterlife. You know, and it is actually really hard, even in that situation, which you're up against some nutter, that you're actually not able sometimes to get your point across because of that.
And then the additional frustration of the persecution complex that actually you know that you're feeding into something that they want.
Totally.
You know, it's like a double-edged sword. My favourite was Eddie Izzard many years ago. I've been a fan. I think that's one of the things that kind of helped me understand my own queerness, was because even as a young teenager, I was so strongly attracted to Eddie Izzard, you know, and they...
Very sexy, Eddie Izzard.
Oh, God. And they used to call themselves... they've obviously been on a journey with gender and things recently, but they used to say, you know, so forgive me. You know? But they talked... I learned so much about world history, world politics, about gender. They didn't really go on ever into sexuality, but certainly they were like, I'm the kind of... they called themselves, and people can call themselves whatever they want to, an action transvestite.
Yes.
Do you know? And they were like, I'm like a running, jumping, climbing trees type of transvestite. But in the same time, in their comedy, which they could also do their full show fluently in French, they were... able to give stories of like what happened in terms of how world shifts and wars and different personalities of different countries. They are one of the most smart and educated people I've ever sort of witnessed being part of the world. And I think that as an advocate for the trans community and for the queer community, like now that they've sort of proudly stepped into, they always have been, but now that they're sort of taking ownership of that, like I remember actually in Diageo, many years ago, I was doing a thing with my lovely team, and we were doing this sort of getting to know you exercise, because it was a fairly international team. We were based in London. There was about 10 people in the team plus me, and we were doing these sort of, sorry for the corporate wanky terms, but we were doing like lunch and learn type stuff, but about each other. And like a couple of my team were just really fun, really good at keeping the crack going, and they ended up like doing this whole thing where they would work with each individual, or you would come up with a few slides about yourself. And they had like a whole theme tune music and all playing and stuff, brought in music.
I live for
You are that person in a team, I imagine, as well, if
like,
that environment
anytime
existed.
we speak, I'm like, is there an opportunity for us to enter from the back?
Yeah.
And can we high five everyone on
What's
the way?
the lighting like in here? Have you got any budget around that?
Do you have like a sort of a marching band or anything?
Smoke machine?
Yeah. But
Bubble machine?
Can I give you a cue to turn the lights off and then back on again?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, whenever it came, I had volunteered to go first, because obviously sometimes the person who sort of pops the cherry on the activity should be not necessarily should be the most senior person there, but should be maybe somebody who's comfortable to put themselves out there and sort of set the tone. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'll go first. And they came up with the questions, and then I had to answer them. And one of the questions was about, you know, who, it wasn't like a who would you invite to dinner, but it was kind of like a tell us about somebody in the world that you admire the most. And at the time, the person that I chose, and I probably still would today, was Eddie Izzard. And it was like quite a, you know, the pictures of Eddie at the time, and I'm not using their other name that they also use. It's only because I can't remember what it is, and I want to say it's Sue.
Yeah, but I think we did the work. It is
Susie?
It's Susie, but
Yeah.
we did the work on it, and I think their stage name is still Eddie Izzard.
Yeah,
it's still the name that they go by, and they'll still respond to that in the street and all the rest of it. Because I remember at the time I was sort of deep diving into that and finding that out. So it's Eddie Izzard.
Yeah, like I think that their foray into politics and things is just like so what the world needs. You know, they're just so intelligent. But even in the context of Diageo and that sort of like very London, very corporate environment, you know, one of the things that I did was like sort of print out pictures of them and, you know, on the stage and in makeup and acting and things like that. And even at the time, I remember just sort of like as a person who wasn't out there, I remember sort of feeling the little yes of like queer representation, you know, in that corporate environment, as you know, other people are choosing, you know, at the time it wasn't really the time of influencer culture yet, but we were certainly, as marketers, we were starting to step into
She's a queer, get a Smirnoff in her hand now.
Exactly, come for Absolute. Other vodkas are available.
I'm problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
Problematic.
Yeah, you drink responsibly.
Vodka, politicians, people vodka.
Exactly. But yeah, Eddie Izzard is just somebody who, like, I have just always had, like, such a connection to, and it was only really coming out, and I suppose more us having our who we are in the world, what we're doing, me living as more of an out person and taking the, you know, this was the more public position with that, you know, in terms of how we speak on social and how we are as an organisation and things. It made me self-reflect as to the people that I had really felt close to or felt, and for the first time I realised myself about the purpose and the poignancy of being visible and being out there and being yourself, because you don't even know whether it could be somebody who 20 years later that actually realises that one of the reasons they attached to you was not just because of the cool things that you say and because you're funny and you're smart and you're all the rest of it. It's also because you're queer and they're on that journey themselves, you know, and the powerfulness of going through that journey so publicly has been so helpful. That would be a dream guest, would be Eddie Izzard.
Oh, here, we'll get him on, or we'll get them on.
Yeah.
Do you know, actually, a good example of that is what happened this week when we did a lecture at Ulster University this week. Yeah, big fish energy. I don't really mean to even say fish there.
You said that before to somebody.
I watched. Do you know what the thing that I wanted to say was professional fish, and even that is very questionable. But do you know what? I watched this interview. I don't know if I've talked about it here yet, but I watched this interview with Shangela, the RuPaul's Drag Race queen. Funny, we're back there. But she was really hitting home that kind of message, and there's something about it is just stuck in a part of I call it my shelf in my brain, the kind of easy access stuff that's been recently used that you just kind of quick grab and you got it. It's what you're trying to do in terms of marketing, is try to get yourself on that shelf so that you're sort of the topic of conversation or the first thought. But she, in her professional fish, media fish, whatever else she was saying, something about that is stuck in my shelf. And the odd time we've been in a meeting or somewhere else, and it just came out. I just say it, and you can see kind of the regular people. Isn't that our new word for them? The regular people. We're going to typical people.
Yeah, basically people that aren't queer, and you don't want to like sort of have any like
you don't want to say normal or you don't want to say basic.
Yeah, but basic is a whole other category, because that's like a subcategory of, and there's also basic queer people. That's like a whole different description, you know. So it's just kind of
let's
like
define it.
Everyday or typical people that are not queer or that's
but
it.
Their reaction to fish is just it's in. In fact, queers would take it another stage. There could be really offence caused there, but it's like bamboozlement.
Yeah,
they're just sort of like, what?
There's so much of our language, though. Like it's one of the things, and we've said it before in this podcast, I'm sure. There's so many words that we use that I'm so glad that you are so fluent in queer as you are. Queer and Irish. That's so impressive.
Trilingual.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Try my patience more like. But whenever we'll just like let out a wee phrase like that wasn't even a raid or anything. There's so many people that don't know that a raid is a slagging.
Yeah. You say to someone, "Oh, bitch, that's not a raid."
Yeah,
and they're like, "Well, you've just called me a bitch, and you're talking about raiding."
And both of those are like positive things, but they don't come across that way.
No, it's actually it's just like, "I'll tell you, should be grand."
Yeah, it was like I done Brona's Patreon with her.
Oh yeah,
yesterday, and she spoke for like maybe like 10 minutes about this wee story. But because she was like retelling something from when she was younger, a lot more like colloquialisms were coming out.
Yes.
And I had to spend like 2 minutes afterwards going, okay, so for anyone that doesn't understand, here's a glossary. So and says, so this thing means this thing means that. And she's going, I didn't realise how many like West Belfastisms I used in the space of 10 minutes there.
Where like each of those things means something, and actually sometimes it's something that's on or inexplainable to the wider public, because it really is a word that is useful and is sort of separate to the other words.
Yeah, totally.
There's so many of those things, but
language is brilliant.
So you speak West Belfast, you speak Irish, you speak sort of regular English.
Yeah, so now that's four.
And queer,
and a wee bit of German.
And a wee bit of German. Wow. You're so, you're what is that? What's 5? If you're...
There's a polyglot, you call someone that speaks more than 2 or 3 languages.
You're getting so fat. That's that Word Up podcast. So the Word Up podcast, as we are contractually obliged to talk about, is really quite
It's all right.
Good.
You know.
It's something to listen to. You know, it's
there.
Sean is the producer of Word Up. Really, truly, we actually really love it. Bruna has really good guests. She gets people like David Doherty Jebb on, who's just a fucking gag. She's had us on a couple of times. We have so much fun when we do it. For anyone that hasn't watched it before, she's actually the other side of this wall. Like, I don't think Bruna is actually there, but her set is.
Well, we haven't checked today.
Yeah,
but it was Bruna that got us her start in the podcast. But anyways, like what we're saying, I'm gonna try to get better at actually like telling the story. We watched back on our greenhouse video, and we were trying to edit together what it was and what it actually was going to do, and it was very hard to get that information, and sort of take the information out of so many of the side stories. But anyway, so we're talking about Ulster University. We should probably get those hats. What are they? You know,
mortarboards.
You don't really need a degree. We've done a lecture. Get one of those on. You know, we get a badge. Maybe get. I wanted to steal their lanyards so that people would say, "Oh, do you work for Ulster University?" And say, "Oh no, I'm just a guest lecturer." Actually,
Connor was living their full Kim Kardashian at Harvard fantasy, like going in to do it. Like, but I think it went really, really well.
I think it did.
Yeah, like I mean, we don't say yes to anything that we're not going to put effort into and make sure that we can do a good job of it, you know, for many reasons, like integrity being one, but also just like, you know, why would you do something half-arsed? If you're going to do something, do it right, you know.
Yeah, let's smash it.
Exactly. So we sort of, the way that we presented was, of course, they wanted to hear about our work and our history and things like that, but we really did not talk about that too much because we were there standing in front of them. They can find all of that stuff out by looking on our website or on our social media.
We did the quick read through. It was like what you do at the end of an ad for some sort of drug, you know, and they are like, and this could cause headaches and you could die. And it's that. It's like, we're in another world. We do this and these are our projects. And
look it up if you want. Follow us on social.
Tell you, we thought we'd give the lessons, the sort of, not the lessons, but the things that we would have loved to have heard as younger people. Because these kids, they're young people, but they're literally out of school.
Yeah, there was foundation year, so you know it was their first year at uni. So like we were sort of doing the calculations, thinking like sort of 6 or 7 months ago, these guys were just finishing their A levels at school. You know, so they really now a lot of mature students there as well, and people that have maybe just like taken a few years out. But the large majority of them were sort of fresh out of school, fresh into that experience. So we wanted to just kind of, without trying to patronise, we wanted to kind of share some of the things that, as a young creative, you would have hopefully liked to have known whenever you were at the beginning, so that you could maybe like even craft your learning in that way, you know. Things
like buy your drugs on a Wednesday, never buy them in the club. You know, if you're buying sex, then make sure. I'm only joking. No. None of it. All of that was sort of sitting on my shelf actually as you're there, because the moment that you're not allowed, it's like
that's the difference in you and I.
I don't think they told you. Didn't tell us not to swear, and we were very good not to sort of like just flood the place with fucks.
If the billboard out the front says 2 kebabs for $5, it's not actually 2 kebabs for $5.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means whatever you want it to mean.
What's a kebab? Is a kebab a fanny?
Yes. No, I mean like an actual kebab.
No,
that comes from, like, see, going into kebab shops, like, late at night, you know, like, especially in the university area, like, they put all these, like, deals out.
And they don't exist?
And they don't exist.
Oh, we've experienced that. We experienced that in that bloody Lebanese place, do you remember? And actually, the 2 times that we went in, we were like, oh, that's really good. That lovely flatbread stuff with the spices and all.
Yeah.
And the first time we went in, we were... it was amazing. It was really good. It was like exactly what we wanted. And then the second time we went in, it was something like fucking £500.
Yeah.
You know, it was really expensive. That's one of the life lessons that we actually didn't get to on the day.
Yeah.
But what we did get to is a whole host of things that basically we would say quite a lot when we go to sort of corporate. We go and speak to a corporate group, or there's people in the warehouse helping us, or there's another group doing something with us, that will just try to sort of feed these messages, and it's everywhere from sort of far left but still democratic socialism through to just some of the lessons that really you've learned along the way, especially in the corporate sector, that are very helpful, things that I fought against for years, because I'm like, no, I'm not here for your corporate, you know, nonsense. And now I'm like, now I find myself saying them out loud.
Yeah.
You know, like lots of, I'm not quite at like a low-hanging fruit kind of space.
No peeling back the onion yet.
No, but there are a few things that you sort of, even just saying it out loud, when you listen to yourself talking, you think back. Whenever you then take over, I think, what is this? And I'm looking at the kids thinking,
You've got a PowerPoint in front of you. It says synergy.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we were trying to talk to them about, the how to be creative, and it's like creating the conditions for creativity, and it's like certain things that like were observations as well, that at least if you put them in front of people, and you're saying it from people, we're aware of our position of actively working in creativity. So that's maybe not an opportunity that some of the kids there might get, other than the lecturers around them who are obviously also working in creativity. But other than that, maybe they're going home to a parent or a guardian or multiple parents, and maybe they're not working in creative fields themselves. Maybe they're working in Tesco. Maybe they're an accountant. Maybe maybe they don't live with parents. But the opportunity to have like people who are like actively doing it and doing it as queer people as well, which is a key thing as well. It's quite a unique opportunity to be able to say, okay, so in order to be creative, you've got to look after your shit. You can't be like partying please do party, but just don't burn the candle at both ends. You've got to kind of leave some of your brain power and your energy available.
Wow. Like, if Becky 20 years ago could have seen herself say... In fact, you were always kind of the responsible I
managed
raver.
to balance them both. That's how come I never had any problems
What would you say to 20-year-old Becky?
yes, totally. I mean, I don't know. I would probably say make sure... do you know what I would say? I would say go and buy that set of decks. Be more creative, have more confidence in yourself, but also do keep trying different things and making sure that you've still got enough, money coming in to pay the bills, because that was always the thing. It's about balance, and I think that's why I never really struggled or got in trouble with partying. Of course, I burned the candle at both ends and did stupid shit. But whenever you're in your 20s, you've got the energy to be able to kind of cope with it. You just have to make sure that by the time you get to the end of your 20s and early into your 30s and your energy starts to diminish in a big way, that you've set some stuff up in your life that means that you've sort of done something, that you've got enough experience that you can turn that into something that's going to kind of last a wee bit. That doesn't mean you need to have your career sorted at 24. Far from it. But it's like, rinse your 20s, enjoy your life. But if you're going to pay all that money to go to university, fucking use it.
I don't know. What you're saying about what would you say to 20-year-old Becky? Well, what would you say to 20-year-old Connor? I've been thinking while you were talking, and I don't really think it would change that much.
Same.
I would probably I don't know. It's sort of in me to say like I would ride more people, or I would do more gear, or I would. I was so busy. Honestly, I was so busy doing drugs. It's deep in some rave somewhere that I was not in. I can't mix the two things, drugs and sex.
That was later times.
Thankfully, I never mixed the two things.
Yeah.
But it never really worked for me, and I just didn't
there's
find
technical
it.
issues.
Yeah, and there's trust issues and all the rest of it. I was much more concerned. Like, I didn't want to be in bed with someone thinking, don't you think that person downstairs still has a couple of whatever? I was very much in that space. I was obsessed over that. But yeah, I don't think I would probably change much. It's inside of me to say it would be a bit nicer to people.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't amazing. I was angry and I was upset, and I used to make a point of just kind of falling out with everyone. And I probably would say be nicer to people, but at the same time, that's informed who I am today.
Yeah.
That informed the kind of that took me to a certain place that then created a major downfall, which then created many ups and downs that then led to this.
Yeah.
It means when I meet a me, and the odd time you do within the career, actually it's more often than not, you meet people in their early 20s when they're queer that are just fucking raging. It's then now having the experience to be able to say, I know who you are, I see what you're doing, and I know the game you're playing, but know that it's not that important. Nobody really cares.
Gives you a bit more patience, gives you a bit more tolerance. And I think the only thing maybe would be like, because I love you and I don't want you to, have experienced hurt and harm, I would have loved not for you to have done anything different, but for anybody around you who had, and like, you're not exactly an easy person to ask or to tell to do something.
No.
But I would have loved there have been an opportunity for you to have got counselling earlier. Do you know what I mean? But then that's back to but then you may not be sitting here now.
The one thing that sort of sits heavy on my heart is that I clearly had so many issues when it came to anxiety and depression, drug addiction, problems with all sorts of other things, including food and all the rest of it, that nobody, I come from a family that are very much just like sweeping under the carpet. Yeah, we've maybe at most top line talked about it, but we're not going to sit and have a deep conversation about your emotions.
Shame.
And some of the, or some of the, maybe they just didn't have the answers, because those conversations are then followed by answers or direction. Maybe they just didn't have that. But I wish that someone within that space would have said, "Are you like?" Because I mean, I used to go to family parties off my bake. Like I remember doing an Easter lunch once in Le Mans, and they were all there. They were there with their family. My mum picked me up. I was still having a party. I was hanging over my balcony on the Shankill Road, smoking a bifter. Someone was beside me, no joke, dressed as a unicorn, the full head and everything. Like, we were not sober. And she shouted up to say, "Are you going to this Easter lunch?" And I was like, I looked at her and I was like, "That's my fucking mad." Like, I couldn't even connect the fact that, like,
focus.
She was actually my mother on my actual street. Like, and she shouted again. And I was like, yeah, we'll get ready. And I remember my partner at the time, Michael, running and getting ready. Like, he by the time he got there, he had eaten so much, he had like munched so much of his face because he had taken so many pills that he could barely speak. He could barely use his tongue. And I was there still, like, nowhere near a come down. I mean, like, still up there. And there were like younger family members, children at this thing, you know. My granny was there, and we arrived in fucking bits. But rather than saying, "Are you all right? Can I get a taxi? Can we talk about this next week?" It didn't need an intervention. I don't think it would have really probably reacted to that very well, and they knew that. But rather than checking back in, it's just kind of forgotten, or it's maybe talked about behind your back. But it was never something that we sort of discussed. And I know that because I kind of know the way they work, because from the other side you would bring up potential issues to say, do you ever think that this person, that's maybe what they're struggling with, or do you think they need help with this thing? Or it always kind of came down to, it's not really our business, but at some point we'll have to work out who's the leader, whose business is it our job to do that, and then also set that example for younger people that it is, because now I know, as the family that we have around us, that that's fundamental. That's sort of at the core of it. It's looking after each other and making sure that we are that we're not
safe,
that we're safe, and we're not straying off the path. You know?
And that's basically the problem with the law. And I've been wanting to talk about this for ages, and we sort of started to talk about it a wee bit with Kate last week, but with so many things to talk about. It was such a gorgeous conversation. But talking about, she was talking about, I asked her about, her views on legalisation and regulation of cannabis. And that was a positive outcome. But there's a much bigger story to be told, and studies to be done. That the studies have been done all around the world already. The fact that we have a hush, any discussion about addiction or about drugs or anything like that.
Drugs are bad is the full stop.
And therefore that shuts down any form of conversation, and there are certain things that as a society they have always happened and they always will happen. So by shutting down all conversations about it, it means that people are doing things in an unsafe way. The fact that we have this taboo around talking about it means that we can't put in, so for example, they're talking about doing a safe consumption room at the minute in the city centre.
They're calling it an overdose prevention space, which I think is so smart. It's great marketing, that.
Yeah, and it does come down to language and things like that as well. But until we actually start to look at the science, the science is that says that it's not the pure substances is not the thing that causes the harm. But the substances as they exist in the minute, being sold in the black markets by organised crime gangs, that the drugs are not illegal because they're dangerous because they're illegal. So while we push things underground, we're putting those substances, which will always be taken, into the hands of people who don't really give a shit whether they're safe or not. They're all just interested in profit, probably in human trafficking and all the rest of it at the same time. They're coming from smuggling routes. There's a lot of harm, a lot of complicity happening along the routes. And it means that what's happening is kids are overdosing. Not just kids, loads of people are taking substances, and this is the thing, it's not just recreational drugs. It's prescription drugs as well, which is almost a bigger problem now.
The problem is prescription drugs. So our doctors, and of course there's great ones out there, and everyone's trying their best, and the NHS is doing very is doing very difficult work. All of that aside, there are doctors out there that are incentivised just to get their patients out the door. They'll give them whatever they want, and then they're further incentivised to cut that medication, to cut that back, so that we're not, as a society, or at least as a NHS, we're not we're not doing that to people. But what happens once you're already hooked on some of those substances is then you'll go out to someone in an organised crime gang. So no matter what part of your community is, you know most likely where you can go and find a strip of diazis.
Yeah.
And we've joked about it in the past. It's not a joke, but it's definitely accessible. The problem is that those diazis, years ago it would have been wee Mary was pretending that she was depressed, or maybe she was, but she still needed the money, so she would sell it.
Yeah.
And she would sell it for $5, and they would sell it to the community for $10. But now these are made in God knows where, shipped from all across the world, containing God knows what, and really serious compounds that are so serious if you mix them with other substances like alcohol that it'd make your heart stop.
Yeah, and people don't, because the quantities are all over the place, and this applies to whether somebody's taking a fake prescription drug or whether they are taking heroin. The strengths of them are so up the left that it means that somebody may be taking an amount that they believe to be safe, and they've got a physical, chemical addiction to the substance, whether that has come from being hooked by something that doctors prescribed or something that you've bought from a street dealer. They're taking a certain amount of something and they don't know what the strength is. So therefore they're either overdosing or it's causing them major long-term health complaints. Mm-hmm. So we need to start to have adult, educated, grown-up conversations that says, okay, one of the things that I quote regularly, there's a book called Chasing the Scream by a journalist who has been discredited for his past. He said some things that weren't true about a specific article. However, the rest of his life is now dedicated to the pursuit of truth. And one of the first novels that he brought out, which is a major research piece, is called Chasing the Scream. He has another book called Lost Connections about mental health, and it's also absolutely incredible eye-opener whenever it comes to the reasons that as a society we have a lot more anxiety and depression. But within Chasing the Scream, he explores everything going right back to prohibition in the States of alcohol, and he looks at all substances as the same. So we're, as a society, nobody bats an eyelid about, alcohol. But yet there has been scientific studies done that have been published in The Lancet, which is a medical journal. Professor David Nutt created this study where he looked at every single substance, like any substance that would create a different, like an altered state, everything from alcohol right up to, acid, heroin, crystal meth, every substance known to man at the time. He looked at it and he created a scale of harm. And the scale of harm looked at the harm that you would do to yourself and the harm that you would do to people around you, whether they were close to you or whether they were in society. And then based on this, medical trial, they were able to look and compare like for like in all of these substances. The substance that came out top as the most harmful in terms of what it can do to you and to other people is alcohol. Alcohol is now... That was done a few years ago, and I'm actually really interested to know if other substances that are started to come out that are newer, like spice, for example, which is terrifying thing
fentanyl.
That is
fentanyl, exactly,
fentanyl.
As well.
Well, that's the sort of stuff you're getting in your diazis. You're getting, and you think it's something else, and you're having a bloody overdose.
Yeah, exactly, like Oxycontin, all of those types of things. I don't know whether they've gone back and added those substances in and looked at them in the same way. However, at the time, and it wasn't that long ago, alcohol was the most dangerous substance, and yet that's a substance that is legalised and regulated. It's regulated because you can only buy it in an off licence, or you can only buy it if you're over 18 and you have to show ID. That's what that looks like. And now that there's more profit becoming available, countries like the States, are legalising cannabis because they're able to look and say, okay, there's actually a lot of profit in that. If you tax it, if you regulate it, then it means that you can make sure that younger people don't get at it. It's much easier right now, and this is the thing that people keep missing. It's easier for a young person to go out and buy drugs from a gang than it is for them to go and buy a bottle of vodka, and that is the power of legalisation and regulation. It means that you're putting up shields. You're actually protecting more people, and you're making sure that if you buy vodka, it has a label on it that means that it's been made in a safe way, better than if you go and buy counterfeit vodka, which is the truth. You can still go and buy fake vodka. Whenever I worked in Diageo, there was loads of problems with counterfeit Smirnoff.
That's our drinking game. It's Diageo.
Yeah, this is my
That's actually
Diageo
a
one.
good drinking game. Maybe they want to sponsor it.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a real problem. It's why also, there's like a duty mark as well on the back of a bottle that was brought in that says that it's been bought in this country, it's passed all of its checks and things. That is regulation. So we need to start to look in a grown-up, sensible way about how we do that with other substances too, because they're not going away. You can't get rid of sex work. You can't get rid of drugs. There's just certain inalienable truths that will always happen within society, that if we don't get in front of them, then they're going to be pushed underground and they're going to continue to harm people.
And to be clear, that's not that you're going to be able to walk in the Tesco's and buy some heroin.
No.
There are models that already exist, like Switzerland, for example, and Portugal now, and other places that prescribe that. So it's part of a medical feeling process where they then will have a safe injecting space where people. Switzerland had a real epidemic of overdoses, and ever since introducing that for heroin and for some other substances, they've seen that dramatically fall.
Yeah, because what happens is whenever you can give people a space that the doctor will prescribe the substance, so be it heroin, they'll prescribe it. People can have as much as they want of it,
dose it as well.
Regularly, so long as it's not a dose that will cause them harm, but they can have anything that they want up to that level. And what they're also doing at the same time is providing people with education, with help with their home, with help with anything that they need
with
that's going to help.
Clean needles and equipment, and
Exactly. But then what they were finding is as they're making that easier for people, and it's not like causing their life to be a chaotic nightmare while they're trying to find a substance, they're then actually aging out, and the thing that they're trying to numb, which is the reason that they're taking a substance in the first place, they're also addressing it with therapies at the same time. So then people don't want to numb out the good stuff alongside the bad stuff.
Because the centre of so much of this is mental health.
And that's whenever you were saying about the prescription drugs as well, the reason why people are being given more prescription drugs than they need to, and they're having to go and find them on the streets, is because we do not have, and PPR are doing great work on this at the minute, we do not have the mental health services that will address the mental health crisis that we're facing at the minute. The epidemic that we have around suicide, we need to actually provide better services, more societal cohesion and methods for people to be able to manage, particularly in this country where we've got a whole country that is traumatized.
I think we've got one of the highest rates of prescription drug use in Europe. Now, we'll work out what that actual fact is, but I'm sure it is one of the highest rates because of that.
Yeah.
There's no... I'm sure there's lots of other factors in the world because we're now a sort of global society, but there's a reason for that, and it's because we have the history that we have.
Yeah.
I don't know if you actually said it out loud, but the person that wrote that book was called Johann Hari, and the books are called Chasing the Scream and
Lost Connections.
Go and read them. So Chasing the Scream is all about the drugs, and Lost Connections is all about
the things that as a society we have lost connection with, that is causing depression and anxiety.
Yes.
And it's everything from our connection with with other people, with the ability to be heard, with status, with the opportunity to be in nature. There's just like an absolute wealth of things that if you or somebody close to you is feeling low, you can probably use it as a bit of a checklist. It's been incredibly helpful for us in what we do. And I've passed that book on to many people and told them to read it. And they've got back to me to say, whoa, I see why you've done that. But it's opening the opportunity to be able to have conversations that at the minute, are a very risk-averse way of dealing with anything, people being scared, which also relates into how, like Kate was saying last week about how our voting system works, that people are always on that, like, what's the next opportunity to get me in? So they're not necessarily always prepared to talk about unpopular topics, like people seeking asylum and things.
We are actually starting to see that a wee bit, though, now that there's sort of an election looming. We're getting I'm actually on board with abortion because, funny, the person that's going up against me is very vocal about that. I'm now going to get a picture with a lot of brown people because we are very white.
Yeah.
I'm not, whatever else it is, you start to see that, and actually there in my mind anyways, there's a cut-off date for that.
Yeah.
And it's somewhere about now. Everything that sort of comes just before an election sort of does start to feel feel a little bit unbelievable.
Yeah.
A little bit like that, like you're edging for votes.
Yeah. But, at the same time, we also, and I totally get that, but we also are very aware of the tokenized to normalize state, where somebody may sort of, for whatever their personal motivations is, which may not be amazing, to start to actually entertain the conversation. At least it gets them in the door.
Yeah.
And at least, in the same way that people will use sort of shittier opinions to validate their own shitty opinions, it makes it a bit harder for people that hold the shitty opinions to still have them, whenever somebody that they had previously looked up to then changes their mind. The space for people to change their mind is such an important one.
Yeah.
It's such an important one in this country as well, with the constitutional questions that we have at the minute. We have to be able to say, okay, and it's one of the things we talked to University of Ulster about this week was 3 things that we always say is if you can master them, they will change your life. To be able to say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer to that, or can you help me? Mm-hmm. 3 things that often as humans we struggle with, whereas if we could master, and that applies to politics and it applies to everybody, applies to, everything, just the ability to be able to go, okay, maybe we need to rethink that, or maybe I got that wrong. Whenever people can actually show that in a public way, even if their reasons are shitty, I'm kind of like, I'm down for it,
I mean, not so often, but sometimes we're like renegades. And you know it. Like, you turn up to a thing and you're there and you think, are we the diversity?
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing here? But then we're also in the room.
Yeah.
And we're able to have the conversation. And we are skilled enough and professional enough to be able to get what we need from that, And if you're not there to take your photos or you take a few crap ones, we'll make a story out of it. And people know that too. It's why they're interested, because they know we'll sort of shout it from the rooftops. Can I just say it loud that today I'm really trying my best not to breathe into this microphone. I'm so sorry, Seán, that you have to listen to that every week. I actually haven't even really... You've been talking and I've been doing this thing. And I know, because Becky's looking at me like, are you sending me some sort of signal to like fuck up, or do you want to say something? No, I'm like literally, I'm trying to create lovely sound so that you can continue to listen and you love what we've got to say. But I'm also trying just not to do the sort of 40 Berkeley.
Well, I also want to say apologise for my kind of a bit nasally voice today. I'm just at the very tail end of a third freaking cold in the space of
no surrender for the 3-day bender.
I know.
Come on. Come on.
I wish.
I've sorry if I've been quiet the last wee while. I've been doing my research here to fact check some of the statistics. We run a credible organisation.
We do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do. So, we love a fact.
For anyone that's listening for the first time and is wondering what the hell's going on, who this person is, it's Seán. They're our podcast producer, and we love them.
Hello. So you mentioned about the use of prescription drug use in Northern Ireland, and so I just looked up to see if there was any stats to back that up, and there is.
Yep.
So the PAC done a report 2 years ago and found that Northern Ireland has one of the highest rates of misuse when it comes to prescription drugs in the world. And they tested this within the UK, and Northern Ireland is by far, when it goes against Scotland, England and Wales, has a far higher misuse of prescription drugs. And they also tested it against 23 other countries around the world where they could get data from, and the rates exceeded all of those too. So in this, this was done over a decade, but in this small data sample as part of that, between April 2013 and September 2013, this was when it was at its worst. GPs here prescribed enough antidepressants to give every man, woman and child a 27-day supply at the defined daily dosage limits. In England, GPs prescribed enough just for 10 daily doses per patient. The figure in Wales was 19.
Yeah, and you know what, they even and there's way more detail in this in Johann Harry's book, but they are finding in our water, because we're ingesting it paying it out, obviously, and then like water supplies being looked at. They're able to actually test the amount of drugs like sertraline and antidepressants can actually be found in our water now because it's so prevalent in our society.
Getting let the tit like off your fucking top
just
water.
Make cannabis legal. Do you know, like those there's a lot of people.
And the algae off of Loch Ness as well.
This is it. But like we have that is what a shitty statistic. What a thing for us to be able to talk about as a society that we're like the best at. Taking antidepressants and also violence against women and girls.
I was going to say that, yes. We're the best at beating women up and fucking banging drugs down their necks.
Yeah, let's create something to be proud of. We have got a really unique opportunity here in that we are a really small sample base, so you can make a change really, really quickly and really effectively. How about we turned that the opposite way around and we started to do something, much as they've done in a small country like Portugal, that they were able to change up, decriminalise substances, make it that you're taking a health care based approach rather than a criminalising approach, and yes, that would be inconvenient in the city centre because you couldn't arrest somebody for being homeless, but you can arrest them for being not sober, but let's look better at those things. Let's invest in those things, whilst we also look at making life a wee bit more enjoyable for people here because we've already had a bit of a shitty time. Let's make our place great and accessible and a wee bit more progressive, but we can only do that whenever we actually start to unlock some of the political deadlocks that we find based on, here we go again, religious oppression.
That is what it is. That should be our new counter is religious oppression.
Yeah, and capitalism.
I love this setup, Seán. I love that we can, because there's so many times that I want to say something, but I think my brain sometimes is kind of very messy, and especially if I'm talking into a mic, I'm not just with friends. I don't have 10 minutes to think about it, and then it can convey my point. Sometimes I choose not to say things just in case they're not right.
Yeah.
And well, this happened a few times where we've been able to put something up on the screen. I know that you were spreading a rumor about the Israeli
that was
Prime
so
Minister.
Yeah.
But that was good.
But you're only one generation off, and it was like
it was true.
It was there. You were still correct. It was just the minutiae.
But there's loads of those wee things that I love that we can fact check sort of things. So you
Please
can say,
do.
well, actually, it's this. Because often it's worse because you sort of downplay it. So you say Europe or you say the UK or whatever, or UK and Ireland, but it's in a global context.
I'm like when those wee things happen, like it's like perks my ear up. I go, oh, is that right? I'm always like,
yeah. I am very, what's the word? I would always be conservative in what some of the things that we will say will be quite extreme, but like my promise will be.
You're coming out as conservative.
No,
Becky the Tory.
Yeah, that's
not Tory, like conservative in like what the word in the English language means. I will have a cautious approach to saying something. I won't say it unless I'm really sure of it. Do you know what I mean? Unless I've like read a book on the subject, or unless I've like done a.
It's so hard, isn't it? Because like you're talking for an hour, and like sometimes you're not even aware like that you may be saying something that you've heard, and you haven't even like went back and like checked the source or whatever, and like so.
I think I'm much more careful whenever I'm careful anyways, but I'm much more careful when it's a person.
Yeah,
if we're gonna, it's different if it's positive, because people aren't going to be deeply offended. It's not going to ruin the reputation if we overinflate something by mistake. But the other way around, you better be sure if you're bitching the back out of a politician or whoever else it is that you know the facts. Because even just going back to Johann Hari, we're not sponsored by Johann Hari today. In fact, we would love, what we'll do is take this podcast, we'll send it to him because I would love to talk to him.
Oh my God, that would be another dream guest.
Oh my God, really? Even to do a talk in Greenhouse or something like that. Because he's a real leader. But what you had to qualify with Johann Hari. Just before you spoke about him, was that his reputation is sort of somewhat questionable because of an article that came out years ago. It's funny how the establishment press and the establishment tend to really focus in on that whenever you've got a message that contradicts theirs. But it just goes to show a few missteps without you correcting it or apologising for it or recognising that. Can just eat away. It becomes a cancer that just eats away at everything that you've built. And we've worked too hard to. It's been blood, sweat, and lots of tears to let that happen. So we've now got we've got a fact checker, a producer, a friend.
It'll keep us right.
I don't know what else Seán is. What else are you to us?
Oh my goodness!
Amuse.
Yes, I love it.
Yes.
Run all your creative ideas by me.
Yeah, totally. Just generally keeps us right. Just generally sound human.
Just to round
Thank
off,
you.
what we're going to
Love
love you too, darling. What we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about Seán has been in Seán's band Search Party has been in the news, and we're going to talk all about the article and all about what's coming up and all the rest of it. It's got a lovely picture. But here, just to round off what we were saying about the university and what you were then saying about Eddie Izzard, was at the end we were sort of, as magnets, as queer people, we then attracted all the queer kids, you know, and they had lots of questions about pride and the flag and the thing. And actually a couple of other teachers were like, we've never really seen that part of them. They sort of just come in, they're quiet, they're in the wee group, they're in the wee group, and then they go on about their lives. But there's another language, there's another sort of sense of safety that you can sit and talk. We really had to run, because we had a photographer waiting outside the building. Bryony Coles actually helped with our logo and all sorts of things for Greenhouse. Really love her, but she was waiting there in her car outside the building, and we just I almost felt like you're you know, the sort of like political purser person that you're in an event and you're speaking to some diplomat or whatever, and they're like, let me tell you this interesting story about trans people or whatever. You know, they give you the bait, and their job is basically to just take you away from them and make sure that you're not so much of another that you're some sort of either danger
liability
to them physically, or that you are a danger to their reputation. You know,
they were so excited though. They were just kind of like, it's an older queer person, you know, and like in that environment of being able to say, so what do you think about the flag? You know, and it's like, ooh, flags. Let me talk about that. You know,
but it's also nice to say, I think that, not about the flag necessarily, but just like, I think that thing's full of shit. You know, I think we've got bigger fish to fry, or that's really an issue for us, or you know, this thing's happening. You can get involved in all your bits that you're doing. A lot of them were doing stuff with Cara Friend, who we love. They do really good work, and they were doing other wee bits and pieces. But also know that you can come and join us, and that you can volunteer, and you can join our community with Greenhouse and all the rest of it. It was good to have that conversation. We're going to talk about Search Party. So the headline here in the paper is "Call Off the Search Party, new single due out in March. Indie rockers set for new sounds in time ahead." Woo!
That's a Jeffree Star. Yeah.
We just thought we're like consistently all biz for you, and the band as well. Like we talked about this before, about the So Far gig in out of office that we went to maybe a couple of weeks ago now, and it was really good. And we got to hear then we'll just keep on saying it, but we got to hear that song first,
the new song Paradise, which is coming out in March.
It's sort of the lead, I think, like the top. So if Nicole is like the top groupie of groupies, she's sort of the manager groupie.
Yeah.
And she actually gets the rages.
Yeah.
Then
Well, me.
oh yes, sorry, just you. That is
like,
quite
whoa,
the rumor.
Yeah.
Like what member of Search Parties is the father?
Are you starting up the tabloids?
Yeah.
Hello Magazine is going to ruin me dry.
This hasn't even come out yet, and half of West Belfast already know about it.
Yeah.
But no, so if Nicole's up there, I would like to think of us as like our like groupies in waiting.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
You have
annoying fans.
So your new single is called Paradise. It's really fun. Are we able to play some of it in this episode? Yeah. So we'll play a bit of it so you can have a bit of a listen.
And you could go on to Spotify and do like a pre-save of
the track. Yeah. So the pre-save, it doesn't do much for you as like a listener, because like you can just like listen to it the day it comes out anyway. But the pre-save, it's more benefit to like an unsigned band. Totally. Because like what it does is it tells like the Spotify algorithm that there's people interested in what you're doing. Yes. So it's just like a support thing. So it's like it tells them, oh, these ones have actually like people who are interested in this, so we're going to push it to a few more people that could potentially be interested.
Yes. So do us a solid. We'll put the link below, as we have done in our episode where Seán was our guest, officially. We'll put a link to it below. We'll put a link to Search Party and all the bits that you can. So please do go on, and same way you do with us, where you'll subscribe, you'll follow our social media and stuff like that, or the people that we have on guesting. Please do that for Seán. Do us a solid, and because Seán does us
Seán and the band
solids, and is our very good friend that we love.
But it says here in the end of the article, you can check out Search Party's music on Spotify, Apple, Amazon and YouTube. And even if you just listen on one platform, go on to all of them.
Yeah.
Go down and have your dinner and stick your TV on, or stick your whatever player on, and put it on repeat. Play that fucking song, because those things, same for us too. You know, all of those little interactions, and same for even politics. You know, it's what we were saying to Kate, but it's that person by person. You can get the word out there.
Make it part of your like nighttime skincare routine. You know, put your face scrub on, your face wash, you know, and then just set your alarm and put Search Party on repeat. You know?
Yes.
Wake up in the morning with an extra 80 streams.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Love it.
Oh, you wake up in the morning with an extra 80 streams, but don't set it as your actual alarm.
No.
Because that is a song killer.
We did that for Maps by the AAS, because it's one of my favourite songs ever, but at the beginning of it has this like alarm sound going off very shortly, and I thought, that'd be a great alarm to go off, like for my waking up in the morning tune. Bad idea. Now, whenever I hear the thing that goes off at the end of the song, I get an immediate like, oh fuck's sake, I'm gonna get a band reaction, rather than like.
I done that when I went away to the Guildhog when I was a teenager. Like I had the way you could only have like 2 or 3 songs on your phone, because that's all it would hold back then. I had one song on my phone, and it was "Bunkers" by Dizzy Rascal.
Wow, that's not a bad one.
You've grown.
So that was our room's alarm tone in the mornings.
Oh, you ruined it.
And everybody hated it. We would go to the disco like at the weekend and be like, I
don't play
hate
this.
Well,
song.
in fairness, you probably would have got there eventually anyway, so you just short-circuited that for everybody.
Dizzy Rascal's first album, though, was really something.
Totally.
Really
Really
it was,
solid
I forget what it was called, but really sexy stuff. And then that just...
No, I didn't mind a wee bit of Dizzy Rascal, to be fair. Good stuff, like.
Yeah, I was not a fan.
Sorry.
Like, I think that song just kind of killed it for me, but also, like, I was like, wow.
Should be.
I've not heard that laugh before, Seán. I love it.
Seán, so we had to cut there because
I needed to blow my nose, sorry.
Becky needed to blow her nose. But Seán...
That was so smooth.
Very smooth. You should be on Coronation Street.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Dizzy Rascal was brilliant. So next on...
Please, can you make a graphic of you like driving a Segway through the middle of the set?
Yeah, that was gorgeous.
Or like the guy that invented the Segway that like ended up dying because he drove it off a cliff. Wasn't that what it was?
Yeah.
Or it wasn't him. It was the person that bought it.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
So the guy that invented it, I think, got a good payout. He sold the company, and then the rich person that bought it drove it off a cliff.
Yeah,
which is just quite the thing. It actually killed Segways, and I really thought they were going to be the moment. I thought like Tomorrow's World themed, that was just going to be... I knew that we probably wouldn't be in flying cars. I kind of guessed that wouldn't happen yet. Or maybe, I don't know. But I did expect at least that would be on... Like, at least we wouldn't be walking everywhere.
I did. I've been and done a Segway tour in both Rome.
You loved it.
And also in Lisbon. Was it Lisbon? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Both... The first time I did it with my ex-husband, and the two of us, like, booked... we were meeting my family in somewhere else in Italy, but we decided to have a few days in Rome and a few days in Venice. And in Rome, we had booked this Segway tour. I'd never done a Segway before, and I thought, if I do it at the beginning, you sort of do a big loop all around Rome, and it shows you loads of stuff in one go. Mm-hmm. So I'm always in I'm not tight, but I like value for money, you know?
Yes.
And it meant that you got to sort of orient. I'd never been to Rome before, so it meant you orientated yourself in the city, and you got to see lots of stuff in one.
It's when you're taking the actual streets. You know, you're not just on a bus and you're chatting and you don't think. And
exactly.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Like Rome's different from Paris, where like Paris, you see one site, then you can bounce in the tube. Right over to the next site, whereas Rome's not so much like that. It's not as quick to move around.
Well, Rome is more, I would actually say Rome's easier to move around, but you got to be good on your feet.
And it's not the grid. So it's not a sort of set.
Yeah, like on a Segway tour, you were able to very comfortably go around quite a lot of the key spots are kind of right in the centre. You know, like, so you sort of imagine whenever you see stuff on TV that like these things they're pretty vast and pretty massive, but like, I can never remember whether it's the Pantheon or the Parthenon, and I saw Kieran Bartlett correcting somebody on that recently, and I thought, I can never remember which one's which, but the one that's in Rome.
The Pantheon is Rome.
Yeah, and
the Pantheon?
Pantheon.
Oh, so the Pantheon
Parthenon
is...
and the Pantheon.
The Parthenon is it not Greece?
Yes. So it's the one that's in Rome. It's like just right in the city centre.
And that's another fact check moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I love it.
But it's like literally you would just walk down the street and there it is. Whereas whenever it's photographed, it's like, it seems as if it's this big, vast sort of, World Heritage Site and all the rest of it.
To see that building.
We must go, because you would just lap that up, and I just like loved every minute. Rome is very busy, but there is literally just like history just sitting everywhere. It is mad. It's such a mind-blowing experience. But the Segway was an amazing way to do it, because the city's used to it. It's a very pedestrian city, and you were just nipping up hills and round stuff, and you do feel like a bit of a dick being on it at the same time. But whatever. Like you're not damaging the environment by, like fuel and stuff like that, because they're electric charged. So we did that for Rome, loved it. And then whenever we were going with my family, so my mum and my stepdad, at the time my mum would have been like late 60s, stepdad a couple of years older. They're very, very fit and healthy though. Like they're extremely young, and very very active. They're amazing. But they got onto a Segway each. And I was turning into the parent. I was like, would you please slow down there? You're going to do yourself a mischief. Like Simon was flying. Like Lisbon's a really interesting city as well, but it's very hilly. So what? If you're on a Segway, you're just like going up this hill. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And I was like, at the time, I was kind of like, why does this not exist? I was living in London at the time. And it's like, why is this not in London? Why is this not in Belfast? And it's because of our reliance on cars. It's because they can't really interact with cars so well. Those cities are much more pedestrianised and much more used to tourism. It's one of they're about to make Dublin car free later in this year. And maybe they haven't quite got the public transport infrastructure ready for it. I think there's a bit of conflict about that.
Yeah.
But it's something that as a city, Belfast could do really, really easily. We already have that horrific one-way system. But if we could fix our public transport system, it'd be a lovely way to be able to go around the docks and stuff. And it's amazing. We just don't legally allow it, but we should,
Then that concludes our segue.
Our segue about segways. Oh, that's satisfying. Thank you for that.
Just to bring it back round, like at the beginning we were talking. Sorry,
we've given you the wild giggles now.
Yes, Seán. What were you saying?
Yeah. To bring it back around, we started off the show like talking about like what would you say to your younger self and all this here, and we never sort of like really came back to the year one. Connor, and you're saying you're happy with the destination that you've got to, and for everything you've been through, you're here now. You're happy with where you are. So, would your message just be to say thank you?
You're a sweetie. I think that is the thing, though. It's what's that thing that they say that you sort of have no regrets? It's no regrets.
No regrets.
But I never really quite understood that until you can kind of look back a sort of a good chunk of time and think, do you know, that thing happened to me for this reason? And I'm actually really grateful for that. And this other thing happened, and it took me to this spot. And I'm very grateful for that. Even things in our immediate journey over the last few years, you're like, oh, we had that trouble with that person for this reason. Or actually, you then, a few years later, you get the full picture and you think, oh, that was who was at the centre of that. It was nothing to do with us. It was a personal thing, or it was this, or it was that. But actually, in all of that, it makes you better. It makes you stronger. It makes you more professional. It gives you your personality. I don't think I'd have the personality that I have now if I didn't have a really terrible time at school. If I don't think I'd value people as much as I do, and the close, not that I can hold many relationships at once, but the close relationships that I have now, I so truly value, because I never thought I'd have them. I'm thankful. I think I would have a little bit more, I would tell myself to have a wee bit more compassion for myself in terms of my body image and how I looked, and how I went about the world, even just in terms of queerness. I'd probably say, be more gay, do that drag, fucking dance till God knows the time in the morning. I did that anyways, but wear a feather boa if you want. I think the world has sort of changed, and now, and we understand that there's other spaces and places that you can express yourself in that way. It wasn't as available then, but I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to little baby Connor.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is as well is that now, you're in your, I think you still qualify as early 30s, don't you?
Well, I'm 34.
I
don't care.
Yeah, whatever. But the other day, Connor made a joke about me and said something that that was something that maybe they would. I was talking about a piece of rhetoric from my teens or from like the 90s or something like that, and Connor went, "Oh, you probably find that in the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum, wouldn't you?" And I was like, "Right, enough of that."
It's like the only time we sort of really read each other.
Yeah,
you know?
it's very rare.
And it's
very rare.
It's very light.
Yeah, and it's always just for the gags. But no, I think that now that you are at any age, like whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, the thing is that like it doesn't matter whether you look back and you think, "Oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda." Do it now. You know, so now if you now you feel that you have the confidence and the freedom to be able to go out in an evening dress, whereas maybe you might not have had the confidence, or you might have had a different motivation for doing it. Rather than it being about self-expression, it might have been a bit more about like, "I'll show you" type thing. Whereas now you're like, "Look at me in my fucking dress. I am like living," you know. And I did
try it, but I was told I wasn't allowed.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, I was told by my folks, and I was told by partners, and I remember just trying to sort of come into myself a wee bit.
Yeah.
And I remember buying this like fringe jacket that I loved, bought it from a vintage shop, probably spent a part of my mortgage bloody getting it, which was maybe more the problem for my partner then than the actual jacket itself. But I remember being really kind of red for it, like it was like you weren't allowed to wear that out.
And it was really type of gay.
It was really camp, and it was based off Jeffrey or maybe Jeremy. I never remember Scott's collection that he did. It was all this lovely what do you call that stuff again? Fringe. It was stunning, like real camp cowboy. It was around the time of Brokeback Mountain. I was living that fantasy, and I remember people like really ripping the back out of me for it, and now I think, fuck them.
But now you understand that whenever people are doing that, that's projection.
Yes.
That now you have got the wisdom and you've done the work, that you can now see that whenever somebody's trying to bring you down for expressing yourself, that's nothing to do with you. That's about how they feel about themselves, and then you can reflect that in all of the situations that you're in.
There's a really interesting piece of research. There's a writer called Yuval Noah Harari. Has those books, Sapiens and Homo Deus and stuff like that. You know, so it's like all about like human history and human behavior, you know. And one of the things I remember reading in his books was that for most of like our time, like as human beings, we've always yearned for the past. The past always seemed greater than what was ahead of us. So, and it's because most of the population was, you know, under servitude or like peasants or whatever. So you always heard stories of like ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, like the Roman Empire, you know, like you would also always say, "Oh, back then times were great."
Yeah.
But since the Industrial Revolution, and when like the once peasants started becoming like their own people and individuals and stuff like that, we started seeing the future and yearning for the future and what's to come. So outlook on life was far more positive because you were looking forward to what was to come. That's where science fiction all came from, because we were thinking, what will life be like? We stopped thinking about, let's get back to how things were. But
we were able to dream.
But then they say from like this 2012, you know, like doomsday like era we're going into now, we're starting to feel like things are regressing.
Yeah.
And now once again people are starting to feel like, oh, remember in the 90s when everything was brilliant.
Yeah.
Remember in the 70s when things were brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
remember when it was like illegal to be, you hear queer people saying that, like, I would have loved, and I'm actually sometimes guilty of it, because I'm like, I just want to go to Studio 54 and ride all the people and do all the drugs. But you hear people saying that are queer, and you're like, remember that in that time, I know that it would have been wonderful, but you would have been in the closet and or dead and or with a wife, and you wouldn't be able to live your truth because it was illegal. Do you remember that time whenever women didn't have the vote? So I know that you're really into that sort of you're the feminist today that's really into that kind of, we call it the because we once seen these girls in fancy dresses. We were not sober. We once seen them in the Empire doing that, and I think about those girls. But you then think people that harken back to that, and they're like, God, them's were the days, and you're like, were they?
I know I don't mention it enough, but I done like this thing around World AIDS Day like a couple of years ago, and it was an intergenerational dialogue event between like different generations of queer people.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes that really stood out to me was like, there was this girl from Derry who was speaking to an older man from Derry who had moved away in the 80s. Because he had came out and it wasn't, and had to leave, you know, and talked about his experiences living in London, you know, as a gay man, and it was harrowing, you know. It was like really sad to hear like what he went through, and she says that's mad for me to hear, because when I picture like gays in London in the 80s, I'm picturing like everybody loving their life, you know, listening to Bronski beat in the club. And you don't like think about
still hard,
you know,
it's just slightly less hard.
Yeah, well, that's what fosters those communities and those events and that music. It's Bronski Beat,
diversity.
Like it's Small Town Boy. It's the messages, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. What's beyond that? What's the other side of that rainbow? Isn't necessarily the other side of that rainbow for that person. I imagine that moved in the 80s was the AIDS crisis. You know, which was hardly. Hardly a joy, you know. I think programs like It's a Sin are actually really important, and programs like Pose on the BBC to sort of just see what went on, and I think how they handle the AIDS crisis, how they handle the story, and they tell the sort of the human, they show the human impact of that. There's a nice balance that they have between the disco and the fun and all the rest of it and that story. You know, it's easy. You can see that it's made by queer people because it's not traumatizing or triggering to watch. Well,
you struggle to watch it.
I've watched half a Pose because it was a lot, but it's definitely from that perspective.
Yeah, and we should go back and watch it again now that you're sort of a couple of years on from that. But I think one of the things about talking about looking back, you know, that is that what's that account that we follow that shares amazing stuff? Is it Matt XIV?
The Jewish guy. He's from New York. What is he called? It's called Maddie, though I call him Maddie. I don't know.
And he shared an image, and it was like, you know, people like looking back at like, you know, the golden days, you know, and people will say like, you know, things were just so much better before, and even for queer people, you know, there's a bit of that, and it's like there's a picture of this like sort of cartoon of people in the 50s, and it says, you know, it's a picture of a family, and the points to the woman, it says I'm addicted to barbiturates, and the father is like, I'm gay, and one of the kids is like, I'm also gay, and it's just like, you know,
I have polio.
Yeah, exactly. It shows that it's just like, you know, it's rose tinted spectacles in looking back.
Yeah.
But in terms of, you know, being a queer person now, we've said before in the past that like the reality is that for most of the queer community, things are much, much better, you know, in terms of companies, in terms of equality legislation, in terms of most people knowing how you cannot and should not discriminate, things like, you know, street harassment and all the rest of it. For most queer people, that has got better. However, for the trans community, they are being used as a political pawn at the minute to stoke cultural tensions and to divide people, you know, and they're
trans
dividing
people are the new refugees. Just let anyone knows. It's let anyone that's transphobic out there that has shit opinions about people, let them know that, and let them just, you don't need to put anything else behind it, let them just process that, because you're being duped. Stop falling for it. Yeah.
But I think, you know, like whenever you see like the Liz Trusses of the day who are, you know, just failed people, failed politicians really, that have got like very little of the public attention, that are using people that are really like struggling and really often, not always, quite vulnerable. I know that often people don't want to be described as vulnerable as well, but it's not that them as an individual may be, it's just that their position in the world and who they are and their rights are at risk, which is what creates the vulnerability. But it's whenever we take like the Katie Hopkins, there are people in the world like Trump, like Katie Hopkins, like just the hateful people out there that understand that it is profitable, like
Tommy
personally
Robinson.
Profitable,
to
be able to put those shit opinions out there, those very right-wing, very divisive things, because then it means that they're getting clicks and likes and talking points. They're getting invited onto things that they get paid for, you know, so they are putting their own personal profit above the needs and rights of individuals who just want to go about their lives and just express themselves whatever the hell way they want. But I just really want to re-emphasize to say that if you are a person who holds those opinions, you're an idiot. You're stupid. You know, if you're somebody who cannot actually be, or maybe you're just somebody who has been very, very badly harmed and doesn't have the capacity or the empathy to be able to not take something and reassess it for yourself and actually think about it in the terms that it is, you're either very naive and very gullible and influenced by the media, which nobody really wants to be able to say that they are, but that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Or you are very, very badly hurt, in which case go get some counselling. But hurt people hurt people. So you can but do you know what? Healed people also heal people. So it's really important for you to choose what person you are. Are you a person that leads with love? A person that actually wants the best for people? Or are you just an angry little fucker that wants to make life worse for other people? And if you are, then keep your opinions to yourself, and know that that's based in profit.
It's not. It's never the energy of the message that I think people think they're putting across.
Yeah.
I think that people think that it's a show of strength, and actually it's an immense show of weakness.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it, don't make a dick out of yourself.
Yeah.
With that being said, we have to finish this episode because I am literally dying to pee.
Yeah.
And we've ran really quite over.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and watching. As ever, follow us on social media. You'll find us at Another World Belfast or at Show Some Love Belfast. Search both of those and you'll get us. And of course, subscribe on this. Follow, ring the bell, do all the bits.
Tell your friends.
And we'll see you next Friday at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Show some love.